Welcome to Pink Kink,
where we talk about the pretty, twisted side of kink.
I'm Princess Rara.
And I'm Dara, the Electro Khaleesi.
Whether you are a new kinkster or have years of experience, Pink Kink will help you level up your kink knowledge.
Join us on this journey as we talk about our personal experiences and use the knowledge we've gained over 28 years of being involved in both private and professional aspects of this lifestyle to help you explore every facet of kink.
Get set for an adventure. Not only will you learn and grow, but we promise loads of laughter, turning each episode into a fun party. So fasten your seatbelt and let's get this show started. Pink Kink runs off the generosity of our devoted patrons.
As a patron, you will become a member of our special Discord server, receive some adorable Pink Kink stickers, as well as have access to a monthly behind-the-scenes podcast. Patrons also get discounts at our Etsy shop, Pink Kink Boutique, and our online classes at Pink Kink Institute.
In addition, our impactful and electrifying Pink Kinksters get special audio and video episodes. And finally, patrons at our highest tier will be recognized as producers, both here on the podcast and on our website.
If you would like to become a patron, you can visit us at patreon.com/pinkkinkpodcast or click the link at pinkkinkpodcast.com.
Today's episode is produced by our electrifying Pink Kinksters. Thank you, Jay, Witcherman, Brianna Lynn, Daddy J, Fabe, Embers, Blossom, William P, Claire, Lady Blooding, Naughty and Nice, Butte Pain, Manda Panda, Kat, Stefan, Shadow Phoenix, Kilted Sir, Brian, May Cry Devil, Ruby Riot, Mistress Velma, Enchanted Sparrow, The Wombat, Impact Hazard, Twitch, The Midnight Girl, Sinful, J21, Daisy If You Do, AK Harley Chick, Violet Rain, Serenity, Belle,
Eric, Sweetie Todd, Lady Affliction, Dr. Dave, Pumpkin Pie, Ms. Tourmaline, S'more, Hacksaw, Wee Mad Beastie, To Be Better For Me, 3 a.m. Thoughts, Forrest, BP Bryn, Crash Override, Kinky Bear, Barbie, Navigator Bard, Frost, Sinful and Naughty, Coffee and Chaos, Noir, Haley's Comet, Mr. Pillsbury, Peaches, Mighty Owl, Lil One, Princess Sassy Pants, Lady and Lex, Chaos Monster, Kristen, Casper, Hazel Page, and Jessica.
So I feel like this episode needs not a trigger warning, but a content, just a notification that this is going to be a little different than we've done in the past.
Okay.
Well, because it's both a book review / educational information thing.
I am so confused right now.
Well, I read this book and I thought like I would use it to kind of research an episode. But then as I'm taking the notes and I'm doing it, I realized it was also then becoming a book review.
Okay, well,
so it's a twofer.
It's not like we haven't done book reviews before.
No, but it's like a twofer. I don't think I haven't really done a book review.
Good point.
That was you who've done the book reviews. I haven't. But this book, I saw this book. It was sort of a continuation of Winter Fire. Somebody in the Winter Fire Discord server posted a picture of it saying they were reading it. And as soon as I saw the title, I said, I need to read this book and we need to cover it in the podcast. And the book is called Unfuck Your Kink.
I mean, that's a pretty good title.
Right? With the subtitle of Using Science to Enjoy Mind-Blowing BDSM, Fetishes, Fantasy, Porn, and Whatever Your Pervy Heart Desires.
Right up your alley.
So I was like going, just for that title alone, I need to read this book.
Because Rara does like to do the for science.
Right. No, well, I'll do it for science, but I also know I figured it would help you because it would give whys.
I love the why.
Right? So this book, I really enjoyed it. There was some stuff that even I went, I didn't know that. Or, I never looked at it that way.
So this is me throughout the entire episode. Oh, interesting.
Well, I actually posted one of the things that she mentions in this book in another Discord server. And that's exactly what Penny said when she read it. And she went, interesting.
Did it remind you of me?
Yes. So this book is written by Faith Harper, Dr. Faith Harper, who describes herself as a badass, funny lady with a PhD.
Love it.
She's a licensed professional counselor, board supervisor, certified sexologist, and applied clinical nutritionist professor. Applied clinical nutritionist with a private practice and consulting business in San Antonio, Texas. She's been an adjunct professor and a TED Talk presenter and is proud to be a woman of color and intersectional feminist. And she is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. This is just one of the many, many books that she has written, all with some really pretty funky titles.
I mean, you got to have a good title in order to attract your audience.
But this is what the back cover of this book says. Getting off your own way. What turns you on? Maybe it's something vanilla, but chances are good that there's more to it than that. Dr. Faith G. Harper, sexologist, therapist, and author of best-selling titles like Unfuck Your Intimacy and Unfuck Your Blowjobs, tackles the whys, whats, and how-tos of the very wide range of human erotic experience, much of which doesn't involve actual touching. She debunks myths, explains the science behind why we like what we like, and discusses how to engage safely, shamelessly, and satisfyingly in BDSM, pornography, fantasies, roleplay, and fetishes, both common and rare.
Damn.
Whatever gets you off, there's a way for you to feel good while feeling good about yourself. Leave shame behind and let the sex positivity resound. And then I'm going to show Dara this picture. I'm sorry you guys can't see this, but look at what's at the bottom of this. Look at that picture.
Wow.
It's a brain holding a strap-on.
Wow. I kind of like it.
Right? So, and on the front cover, you've got a brain attached to a St. Andrew's cross, a brain holding a paddle, and a brain wearing high heels and just sitting watching it all. So I really, as we go through the book, I honestly think this is a great book. I think whether you are a new kinkster or an old kinkster,
hey,
you'll get something out of this book.
Wait. What do you mean by old? Like experienced?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go. Right?
All my 21 years in it.
She writes in the book about how the point of the book was to call kink shaming shit out. And that she goes through all the research demonstrating why the quote-unquote cultural overlords are wrong about BDSM and kink.
Interesting terminology.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, I'm going to give one caveat here where I don't necessarily agree with her. She really puts kink and sex together.
Right. And I thought this was about not doing that.
Well, what's interesting is that she defined kink as an umbrella term that references any sexual behaviors that are considered different from our cultural standard of normal. And then what's interesting is then she said that she referred to BDSM as being a kink, but also includes furries, role-playing, voyeurism, cucking, and that fetish falls under the kink umbrella in a way that they are also non-traditional sexual interests.
Okay. See, to me, fetishes are more sexual than kinks.
Yeah. But I will go back to, and I think I mentioned it again here later, I first heard this from Sunny Megatron, where she likes to describe it as kink is a turn on, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's your body that's turned on. It could be your heart that's turned on. It could be your brain that's turned on.
Yeah, I usually view it as my brain that's turned
Right?
on. My emotions are turned on.
Yeah. Dr. Harper mentions, and again, I think I have it on my notes somewhere else, that just because you are turned on doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the sex. So she still viewed it, kink, as turning you on. You just don't necessarily have to have the sex.
I mean, it's kind of like, so for me, electro is a kink. I don't get off to it, but audio is a fetish.
Right. And that's what she did define fetish as erotic connection to things that are not on the surface considered erotic.
See, now that makes perfect sense.
Right? Like feet, boots, leather, sounds in your case.
Makes perfect sense.
And where fetish is, and we've agreed with this because we've said this in previous episodes.
Yeah.
Fetish is necessary, whereas kink would not be a requirement to having sexual pleasure.
And that's something we say all the time. So we agree there.
All right. So far, so good?
So far, I'm in it.
All right. So let's get into the science-y stuff of some of this.
I like this part.
So there's some clinical terms. So I'm going to put on my reading glasses and my professorial voice and educate.
Oh, dear
ready?
God. All right.
Okay. So in the book, one of the clinical terms she mentions are paraphilias. And I hope to hell I'm saying all these names right.
Yeah. No, that we actually mentioned that in the taboo episode.
Oh, excellent. So paraphilias are typically defined as abnormal sexual desires. And historically, the practice of psychology was framed around the idea that anything outside the surrounding cultural norms was a mental illness.
Thanks, Freud.
Right? So women who liked sex and masturbation were nymphomaniacs. And that's bad. Or how they used to encourage women to basically, quote unquote, de-gay homosexual men by fondling them, trying to have sex with them.
Basically assaulting them
In the quest to ungay them, de-gay them, whatever. Right? Then she goes on to talk about paraphilic disorder, which could be any kink or fetish that is creating problems in functioning in life. And that classification is really important.
Yes, that one I get.
Right? Because the creating problems in functioning in life is really what takes what we do from just being non-standard and a little bit weird to actually being a disorder and a problem.
And there's a distinction.
Yeah.
It's like I enjoy sex versus I'm a sexaholic.
She actually...
Whoa. You got way too excited there.
She actually talks about the fact that that's not actually a thing.
Sexaholicism?
Yep.
Okay.
But we'll get to that later.
I'm interested in hearing about that.
Yeah. So...
Because wasn't that a David Duchovny thing?
Well, that's what he claimed, but I don't know about you. I didn't buy it then either.
Or sex addict or whatever that is?
I didn't buy that either.
Okay.
So if you aren't hurting anyone or anything, then just be your little sexual weirdo self.
Well, except for if you're Rara, who does hurt people.
Well, yeah, but that's different.
But it's consensual.
I guess and the consensual is the part of it.
Right.
So you've probably all heard of the DSM, right? Which is the standard classification of mental disorders used by mental health professionals in the United States. And for a long time, of course, BDSM was on there. They've now since taken it off. But they do have 8 specific paraphilic disorders. And this is why this is important, this creating problems and functioning in life and consent and all that. So the 8 ones they talk about are voyeuristic disorder, which is getting sexually excited by watching people without them knowing.
Okay, so peeping toms.
Right. Exhibitionist disorder, getting sexually excited by showing genitalias to others who don't expect it.
Flashers.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm going to say this one correctly, so...
What?
So forgive me for all of you who know way more than I do. Frotteuristic disorder.
No idea what that one is.
Well, that's getting sexually excited by touching or rubbing against someone without their consent.
Oh, so assaulter.
Yeah. Sexual masochism disorder. Getting sexually excited by being humiliated, beaten, or suffering. Again, but not, hold on, without the person who's doing it to you consenting to doing it to you.
How would you even get somebody to do that?
Well, for instance, I come up to you and I act as if I'm going to assault you, so now you beat me to get me away from you.
Okay.
Right?
The only thing I can think of there for like a mental masochist, though, is going to an insult comic and getting heckled or something.
Well, here, let me read a little bit more than what I have in my notes. It says, sexual masochism disorder, wherein someone experiences recurrent and intense sexual arousal from the experience of being humiliated, beaten, bound, or otherwise made to suffer. And this arousal manifests as urges, fantasies, or behaviors that are causing clinically significant distress or impairment in life domains.
Is there an example?
Well, the point is if you're so busy seeking it out, you can't live your life.
Right. Okay. So you cannot function as a person, right? Okay.
Or, people who self-harm.
Ah, okay.
It's causing clinically significant distress.
Got you.
Got it?
And that's actually a difference that I've been struggling with.
Right.
Understanding that particular difference.
Well, remember, we talk about it in the healthy hurting episode. That
yes.
Where does it cross the line from I'm a masochist to now I have self-harm issues?
I guess I should say something I did struggle with understanding for a very long time.
Yeah. Then you've got your sexual sadism disorder, which is, you experience recurrent and intense sexual arousal from the physiological or psychological suffering of another person, and that you have acted upon those urges, ready, this is important, guys, with a non-consenting person, or the urges are causing clinically significant distress or impairment in life domains.
Okay.
So again, we're back to that whole point of creating problems in your ability to function in life.
Like you can't hold a job because you're too busy seeking this stuff.
Right.
Yes, I got that.
I
need water.
Then, of course, we get to your pedophilic disorder.
Well, that one's a no fucking brainer.
Right? Getting excited at the thought of sex with children under... Actually, what's interesting is this specifically is children under 13.
Yeah, because there's a different term for teens.
Right. So, but the author's very careful to point out that the individual is either... Hold on. The DSM does specifically state that an individual in late adolescence involved in an ongoing sexual relationship with a 12 or 13-year-old does not qualify for this diagnosis. So if you're 15 and you're having sexual relationship with a 13,
you probably shouldn't anyway.
Well, you should, but you're not a pedophile.
Yeah,
so,
but you're...
Anyway, I don't really want to discuss that particular disorder much of anything, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Ready? Then there's fetish... this is not an easy word for me to say. Fetishistic disorder, which is getting sexually excited by objects or specific body parts.
Oh, isn't that one the My Strange Addiction, the guy that was in love with his car?
Well, car could be that, but you also, even something like your feet, right? Which is what we call that a fetish. We're back down to it's only a problem if you're doing it non-consensually and it's causing significant distress or impairment in life functioning.
I don't think the car could consent.
No. Then you've got transvestic disorder.
Okay.
Which is getting sexually excited by cross-dressing.
Okay.
But again, it comes back down to, is everybody consenting and is it preventing you from functioning in life?
Got it.
And then, of course, there's always the generic other. Because you always need an other.
Yeah, that seems legit because, there could be shit that's not covered, but it's still impacting your ability to be a functioning human in the world and therefore needs some sort of diagnosis, but there's not anything specific for it. Makes sense.
All right. So that's sort of the clinical scientific stuff you need to have in your head before we can get to really the meat of it. So we go on to part one, which is understanding kink and the importance. Why do we like what we like?
Because it's fun.
Right? So it might not be surprising to you to learn that how sexual behavior is regulated by the brain is pretty damn complicated.
Do you think?
Right? It's regulated by both the cortical and subcortical structures of the brain, which basically means it's governed not just by the thinking brain, but also by the feeling brain and our basic staying alive functions of the brain stem and spinal cord.
Staying alive, staying alive.
Do you feel better?
Yes, okay. I had to. It was important.
Sure. So essentially, our sexual selves are influenced by our whole body systems because sex is both primitive and complex. Then she goes into the sexual response cycle, which comes from a model developed by sex researchers Masters and Johnson back in the 60s.
Okay.
All right. So there's 4 phases. First phase is desire. You'll recognize it because your muscle tension will increase. Your heart rate and breathing are elevated. Maybe your nipples are hardening.
Ooh.
Maybe your blood flow to your genitals increase. You might be secreting.
Oh, that's gross.
I know it's a body fluid. I'm so sorry.
Trigger warning. She said secreting.
I didn't say moist.
Now, see that word? It doesn't
do it.
I don't care. But secreting.
So stage 2 is arousal.
More secretions.
Well, everything in phase 1, but more.
That's like column A, and then also column B.
Yep. And the clitoris becomes even more sensitive. The testicles may pull up into the scrotum. You're all ready for stage 3.
The fun bits.
Orgasm.
Yes.
Which is sadly, while the most fun part of all this, is the shortest part of all this.
Yeah. So why it's I don't think it's fair.
I think that's a flaw in the system.
That penises can have longer orgasms than vaginas. I don't like it.
I've had long orgasms.
I mean, apparently you can train yourself into it.
But I've never experienced a penis orgasm, so I can't compare them. I can only tell you what mine are like.
Well, you can also not experience being both kicked in the groin, in the nuts, and childbirth. So I guess there's things we'll never know.
Right. Sadly, what is it? That's like the owl with the lollipop. The world will never know.
Oh, the Tootsie Pop commercial? Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I think it's a flaw in the design system that the most fun phase is the shortest phase.
Well, because you would die.
Right.
Depending on how intense it is. I mean, because remember, I stopped breathing.
Do you?
Yes. You didn't know that?
You stop breathing during orgasms?
Yes.
Then why do you want a longer one? I didn't know you were into breath play.
Apparently. Yeah. No, well, I mean, I want to experience it, but like I end up holding my breath during an orgasm.
I don't, as far as I notice, but I'm again, blood flow is not in the head, so I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I do know I'm saying fuck, 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 fuck over and over.
I'm not. I'm going and then going, okay, when I can actually function.
And then finally, the last stage is what they call resolutions, which is where everything returns back to the baseline.
So after you can breathe again.
Yeah. Now, of course, because, we're human, not everyone goes through this particular order. Not all the things that I've mentioned will happen. Everybody gets to do their own shit, but that's basically what Masters and Johnson came up with. So next up, they covered the brain science of kinky happiness and tried to answer the question, why are some people vanilla, some have sprinkles, and some are just freaks in the sheets?
Okay, did they use the word sprinkles?
Yeah.
Really?
Really?
Oh, I thought we came up with that.
Or maybe we did, and she heard it. I don't know.
Because we came up with this 10 years ago. When was this made? Or 6 years ago? When did you move here?
Oh, I moved here
8 years ago?
Coming up on 8.
Okay, so 8 years ago, we came up with sprinkles.
Yeah, this book is 2024.
Oh, it was totally us.
So it's very possible that she heard it from us.
Exactly.
Is that our story and we're sticking to it?
We are absolutely sticking to it. This person was listening to our podcast, and that's how they did some of the research for this book.
Well, you would love this because some of the titles of chapters are like, okay, blind me with the science.
Okay, I get that reference.
Right? I do. I get that reference, though I don't think I've ever seen the whole movie.
Well, it's also, I think, a song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So she goes into, and it says right here, see, why are some people hella vanilla? Some people like to add a few sprinkles. And some people are comprised,
vanilla.
And some people are comprised completely of sprinkles. And probably some assless leather chaps to hold all the sprinkles in.
Yeah, that'd be you. Although I cannot see you in assless leather chaps.
No, I don't have an ass. It would not.
You wouldn't
those
stay
are for
up.
people who have a good ass, and it shows off. I try to hide mine.
Okay.
Right. So she starts off with talking about the origin of the word pervert. Do you know where that came from?
Not a clue.
It actually referred to a rejection of religious canon or religiosity.
Really?
Meaning an atheist.
Man, I am 3 kinds of pervert then.
Right? So how did the term come to apply to sexual behaviors outside of society norms?
Because everything always comes back to religion and their stupid morals.
Well, it was the fault of 3 people.
Freud?
No.
Oh.
First one was Richard von Krafft-Ebing, who was a psychiatrist who is considered the father of our modern thinking on sexuality.
Oh, boy.
He's actually considered, he was a psychiatrist and sexologist, and he studied human sexuality and mental health in the late 19th century.
So basically quack.
Well, early in his career, he said that sexual differences were a product of mental disorders and therefore should not be criminalized.
Yeah, but still mental disorders.
Right. And those apply to not just actions that were violent and non-consensual, but even to homosexuality. That was a mental disorder and should not be criminalized.
That was considered a mental disorder until the 60s?
I don't know. Again, he didn't believe that these things should be criminalized. Instead, he thought they should be addressed through psychoeducation on sexual deviancy and moral hygiene.
Moral hygiene?
Yep. And eventually he did get over the notion that homosexuality actually belonged in that category. So as Dr. Harper says, we appreciate someone who can learn and grow.
Yeah, but okay, so that is where the rise in like basically torture came from for mental disorders or, you know, whatever.
But he actually cataloged various sexual behaviors like fetishes, sadomasochism, and homosexuality in his writing Psychopathia Sexualis. That doesn't even sound real.
Of course.
It doesn't even sound real.
Because you have to make it sound Latin in order to be taken seriously, obviously.
But actually then all of this, so the next up is a sexologist and scholar Havelock Ellis, and of all things, literary critic John Addington Symonds, who wrote a book about homosexuality called The Sexual Inversion. And you know when it was published? 1897.
Oh my God. Okay. Did you ever see Alan Turing? What is that movie? Imitation Game.
Oh, I know about I never saw it, but I know it.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Benedict Cumberbatch?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. They refer to homosexuality as an invert. And I think that's where it came from.
Well, in that book is where they actually first used the term pervert. And the book was accessible enough to the general public so that the term pervert entered the common lexicon.
Gotcha.
But what's interesting is these two were actually not negative about homosexuality because Symonds, it turns out, was gay. Though he didn't come out till later. But they were actually pointing out the normalcy of queerness among species. And that perversions weren't actually problems. It was just that members of modern society considered them crimes against canon.
Canon meaning religion?
Well, probably at that point.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I'm going to assume.
Yeah. So it was just, there was a study published actually since the three of those guys paved the way for a shift in our thinking. Researchers have continued to demonstrate over and over that there are a hell of a lot of kinky humans running around on this planet.
And we know a lot of them.
Right. In fact, in a study published in 2017, researchers in Quebec surveyed individuals specifically around the paraphilias listed in the DSM. It was a non-clinical random sample, meaning not people already in any kind of mental health services. A solid half of them reported interest in at least one of the paraphilia categories, and 30% had at least dabbled in one. And the research found out that was actually a good thing, because the people who were specifically interested in and engaged with masochism reported higher satisfaction in their sex lives.
Okay, that's cool.
Right? So here's what I found really funny. So next up came actually the question, so what actually causes us to be kinky? And the answer is we don't know.
Oh, damn. I actually thought there was going to be an answer, and I was like whipping my head around like, yes, tell me. I don't know.
Right?
Okay.
We don't know because...
Thanks, princess.
You can't really... I know, I'm sorry. First of all, it says this kind of study is really difficult to put together because people are being all, people-y and stuff.
Because nobody wants to admit shit.
That's part of it. We can't really create an experiment to see if we can cause somebody to have a kink.
Well, what about all that stuff where where do you think your kink came from? Is it really your kink came from that? Or is it, this is when I realized I had a kink?
Well, that's what's interesting. So for instance, right, I know people who talk about their kinks came from that old cartoon. Was it Penelope who was tied to the train tracks?
Oh, I don't know. But
right?
Yeah, the lady in distress thing. Yeah.
But meanwhile, lots and lots of people saw that. Not all of them turned out kinky.
Well, apparently everybody who read a Wonder Woman comic turned out to be kinky.
And yet,
right? Wasn't that what they were worried about?
Well, they were worried about that, but not everybody did. So this is the problem, right? So in order to try to find out what causes us to be kinky, they have to use interviews and case studies and narratives and questionnaires. And here we go. You ready for this? There's a problem with that. Because not everyone's going to be honest and open.
Right.
That so many people still have guilt or shame about their sexual lives.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we had to do a whole episode on how to like not feel completely shamed about the kinks that you have. So,
Yeah.
And people still do. So that makes, yeah.
But some of the stuff that they were able to find out that, do you know that there's a gender disparity in fetishes? So separate from BDSM, where interests are more balanced among the genders, there's a huge difference in the ratio of men to women interested in kinks and fetishes. 99 out of 100 fetishists are cis men.
Makes complete and total fucking sense to me.
Right? Like, well, just look at foot fetishes, for example. How many females do you know who are foot fetishists versus how many males do you know?
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, the proof is there. We've seen it. So, yeah. I totally 100% see this.
So they tried to look at cultural and social factors. So for historical context, men historically had more freedom to explore sexual desires.
Yup.
Openly compared to women, which was always very fascinating to me. So you had like the brothels back in the day. So men needed the women to fuck and then complained that the women would fuck.
I mean, that's basically historically men.
Right. And then
Hypocritical
social norms, right? Men are often encouraged to openly embrace their sexuality, while women might face more stigma for deviating from traditional sexual roles. So, for example, when they always talk about when people are asked, what's your number? What's your count? How many people have you fucked? And the answer is always men lie and will tell you more than they've actually fucked. And women will lie and actually will tell you less than they've actually fucked.
I don't even know my number.
I do because I have it written down.
What? Oh my God. What a fucking Virgo thing to do.
I have written down the name of every person I fucked.
Really?
Yeah.
Shit, there's some that I don't actually remember.
I don't necessarily remember last names, but I have the first names down.
Wow.
Yeah. I was counting one day to see what my number was because up through my first marriage, I think I'd only hit like 8 or 9. And then the 10 years after my divorce, I went from like 8 or 9 to 20. So for the first 50 years, it was only like 8 or 9. And the next 10, I've been a slut.
Yeah. Hey, you all have to have your slutty era, don't you?
Right. But I mean, you look at it, when men fuck a lot of people, it's conquests. Good for them.
Notch in the belt.
Yep. Well, women fuck a lot of people. You're a slut.
Well, we're sluts no matter what.
Yeah, I know. You've got your media and cultural influence. So your media depictions, like pornography, it's often caters to the male fantasies, including perceptions and preferences. And then how available is all of this? They're saying that the accessible media reinforces fetishes associated with male sexuality, possibly contributing to higher prevalence among cisgender men. Again, a lot of this is just guessing because we had to trust that people told the truth.
Yeah, which I highly doubt.
Right. Then you've got your psychological and biological factors. So let's talk about evolutionary psychology. You wanted science. I'm trying to give you the whys.
I like it.
Evolutionary pressures might predispose men to certain sexual behaviors related to reproduction and mating strategies. We always talk about the men going out and breeding and the men spreading their seed as if that's a good thing. You've got your individual differences, variances in sexual arousal patterns and brain functioning could also shape specific fetishes and kinks. The way men and women are aroused. What arouses them? Then, of course, there's stigma, the social stigma, where women face much more stigma for their unconventional desires, discouraging being open about fetishes. Right? Like when a woman says she's into gangbangs.
Oh, clutch my pearls.
Right?
My goodness. That's just not right.
But a man is like, oh, I'm into gangbangs. Oh, yeah, line up, get in line. You're next. And then you've got men also find it much easier to disclose their fetishes.
Actually, the same pearl clutching people would probably still pearl clutch for a man into gangbangs.
Well, if you think about it, you look at like affairs, right?
Yeah.
They have proven that more women are having affairs than people realize.
Just don't talk about it as much.
They don't talk about it as much. And they're different. And the reasons they have these affairs are different.
Also, they don't get caught as much.
Well, but a man is more likely to have affairs because he just wants to fuck everything in sight.
Yes.
While a woman is more likely to have an affair because she's created a relationship with somebody.
And it's a lot of times the reason behind creating that relationship is different. It's because the one she's already in is shit.
Yeah. Well, the man has, especially men, let's say men who travel, the traveling salesmen who have a lady in every city. But men also find it much easier to disclose their fetishes and find supportive communities, while women are more likely to face judgment or negative consequences. Now, this is all, for me, more of what happens in the vanilla world. I don't find within the kink community that this is the case. Maybe I'm just hanging out in a really good community.
We are. Because also, think about it. A woman says in our community, I want to do a gangbang. We're like, fuck yeah, let's go. Let's set it up for you.
Yeah. Or in my case, you do you, boo. Not my thing. You do you.
Rara participated.
I did for a friend.
Yes.
And I came home with a door prize. Which, speaking of which, so one of my metamors is very much into gangbangs.
Oh, perfect.
She does that. I'm like, you do you, boo. That's fine. Not my thing. So society's views on sexuality, thankfully, is finally changing. Though we still have a long way to go. But it is much better. Remember, it used to be that the man was supposed to be experienced going into the marriage while the woman was supposed to be a virgin. Though I don't know where the man was getting the experience if the woman was the virgin.
It was a brothel.
Right? And it's much better now. Now, I think it's the opposite. Now, I think when we find out somebody's a virgin, depending upon their age, if they're young and they're a virgin, that's fine. But if you're, like 30 and a virgin, we're like, what's wrong with you that you haven't had sex yet?
Yeah. So now it's the virgin is the stigmatized one, right? Yeah.
Well, depending upon your age. We're totally okay with somebody being 18 and a virgin.
It just swings back and forth. But it's kind of the same way of like, if you were 22 and unmarried back in the day, what the fuck is wrong with you?
No. Well, then this part's going to make you laugh. So she goes on in the book now to kind of talk about imprinting. And honestly, all I could fucking think about was Twilight. And so she was losing me because I just kept thinking about Renesmee and Jacob. And I was having a hard time understanding because that's my only knowledge and experience of imprinting.
Well, you could also go with baby birds. What the fuck is that child's name?
Huh?
What's the child's name?
Renesmee.
Why?
Oh, because she's named after the grandmothers, Esme and Renee. Yeah, it was a big to-do when the book came out with that name. It was not well liked.
I can see why.
It was quite controversial.
That's a mouthful of a name. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
And that's okay. Jacob called her Nessie as a nickname, which then really upset Bella because she says, you're calling my child the Loch Ness Monster. It was a lot.
Have you seen the video on TikTok of the lady who loves her daughter's name and can't understand why people are making fun of her daughter's name because it's a beautiful name?
I've heard about it, but I don't know what the name is.
Clydia.
Oh.
Because she loves the name Lydia and she thought it was an absolutely beautiful name. But her name has a k sound and she wants her daughter to have a k sound.
Okay.
So Clydia.
This was an episode of Seinfeld.
Was it?
Of something, I don't know if that was the exact name, but it was sort of, they were trying to remember what the hell her name was. And they kept saying it was like after a female genitalia part. It was, yeah.
There was a stand-up comic once who said something about, I'm going to name my daughter Chlamydia. Isn't it? She was joking.
Right.
Because comedy routine. But at the same time, think about it, please.
Please don't.
Because this woman, I don't know if it was a joke or what, but TikTok ran off with it.
So she also talks in the book about the idea that bright, inquisitive kids who are curious about and exploring sexual feelings are often silenced because of our culture of shame around sex.
Yes.
Which is really funny because, I'm the mom of 3 kids. They are entirely different, even though they were raised by me. And my youngest talks about sex with me without a problem. My middle one,
Your youngest also thinks she's vanilla.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. My middle one, every time I ever try to talk to him about sex and safe sex, like I swear to God, he sticks his fingers in his ears and goes, no, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Yes, you're that poor boy.
And my oldest just smile and nods at me like basically, there goes mom again. All right, just deal with it.
He's been with the times longer. He's seen you longer than they have, so I think he's more used to it.
My middle one was definitely, no, Mom, I'll learn it on the streets. Just please stop talking about it.
Poor baby. He could learn so much more from you if he would just let it go.
Yeah.
He'd probably have some fantastic technique.
Right. And then there's my youngest too. I don't know if I've shared this conversation before, but this is one of my proudest mama moments. She must have been about 13 or 14. And she says, Mom, I don't understand why people wait till they get married to have sex. Now you've got two virgins. Neither one of you know what you're doing. The sex probably sucks. And now you're stuck with each other because you're married. And
wise beyond her years, that one.
I'm verklempt. I'm so proud of my baby girl.
Not the typical mom reaction.
No, you know what? Again, I forget I'm not typical. I may be neurotypical, but that's the only typical in my world.
That's all you got. That's your only claim to fame there.
Right? But this is where the stupid imprinting comes in. They talk about, and the denial of their curiosity leads them to imprint on something that may not generally be considered sexually provocative. And I still went, huh?
What? I don't understand what that means.
So I kept trying to read it. And basically, they covered a lot of fancy talking science and concluded with, quote unquote, things that happen to us sometimes cause fetishes.
Okay, that's so helpful. Thank you.
I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
God, there was so much build up to that. And then that was the most anticlimactic answer.
And the answer is basically because.
Okay. Why? Because. Okay, thank you.
They don't know why some of us are vanilla and some of us are not.
Wouldn't it be interesting if somebody came up with, I don't know, a brain scan?
But so like, how do you do that?
I don't know.
Like, how do you, I guess you'd have to, it can't be like an MRI kind of brain scan. It would be the kind like you do where you just put the electrodes or whatever those things are called on their head. I'm sure they've done some stuff like
there
this.
There has to be.
What I did find interesting though is, so she keeps saying a lot men, and she goes, because women are different, that cis women are known to show more erotic plasticity.
The what?
Meaning that women can have a sexual excitement response to a much wider range of stimuli.
Okay. I can run with that. Sure.
Right? So next up, we had the section called Unfuck Your Sexual Shame.
Okay.
And I really love this. And she quotes psychologist Jessie Bering, who basically said that we are all perverts. And that there is something you've either done or entertained at some point that would cause somebody else to have a negative response.
Yes. Okay. Makes sense.
And we spend way too much time deciding what is normal and what is perverted. And are focusing our energy on the wrong fucking thing.
Okay.
Right? So this doesn't mean that every behavior should be accepted. Back to this whole, are you hurting somebody? Do you have consent? Right? So some things, yeah, you have to say, no, that's not acceptable. But most everything else, as long as you've got consent, you're not hurting anybody, and you're able to function in life, you be your perverted self. All right? She did talk a little bit about trauma response and whether or not that's what has driven us into kink. Because you know how we always talk about how traumas create kinks?
Yeah, but at the same time, we've also proven that that's not entirely accurate.
Okay. Here's what's interesting. There is absolutely zero, nada, nil, no evidence that any kink practices are an unhealthy response to abuse or other incidents of trauma. In fact, while researching the book, she found more evidence that kink is healing to traumatic experiences.
Oh. Are we going to do an episode on that?
Maybe. I mean, she talked about, and some of this stuff we covered in healthy hurting too, but here are the questions you need to ask yourself to know whether or not this is good or bad. Are the activities enjoyable in the moment, or do they feel like a compulsory exercise? After engaging in the activities, do you feel enjoyment or a sense of relief?
Oh, so basically what I felt after I was done having sex with my ex-husband.
Yep. Do the activities cause a feeling of fun or a sense of obligation?
Oh, yeah. Ex-husband.
And when you can't participate, do you feel like you are missing out or a sense of relief?
Wow. This is just calling me all kinds of out, isn't it?
So that I enjoyed that because I feel like too often we focus on kink being a trauma response, and that's bad.
Yeah, no, none of the kinks that I personally have right now are any kind of trauma response because I enjoy the fuck out of them.
To me, the only kink I have that's a trauma response is my praise kink because I grew up without any. So getting praise is important to me, to the point that if I don't get praise, then the little obnoxious voice inside my head, you know, the one that tells you lies.
Yes.
Starts saying, oh, well, maybe they don't like you. Maybe they don't want you. Maybe they're not attracted to it, whatever. So, but here's the section I was telling you about. Hypersexuality doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is the part that I really wanted to hear.
At least it's not really a problem if it does. All right. So there was actually in 2012, they did a group that advocated to have the DSM formally recognize hypersexuality. And it didn't really work.
Okay, why?
Well, the reason they pointed out that his focus was on the distress the client was feeling about their behaviors and their negative view of themselves and their sex lives, which is admirable because it led to, you know, some good working with their therapist. But clients' feelings don't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
So maybe they were feeling bad about themselves because of the religion they had been raised in. While in other religions like Judaism, we don't think poorly of you if you have sex. In fact, it's a good, wonderful thing if you have sex on Shabbat. That's a blessing. They tell you to go ahead and do it. Remember, in Judaism, we say that it's the man's obligation to make sure the woman has a good time during sex.
Good on Judaism.
Right? So you can't really... So was the person really hypersexual, or did they just perceive themselves as hypersexual because of the way they had been raised? So as she says in here, so back to remember that cool psychologist who said we're all perverts?
Yes.
He also said one person's sexual exorbitant is another's slow Monday morning.
Oh, so you and me.
Yeah.
What could be considered completely bonkers to me is like, oh, Rara goes, oh, yeah, that's Tuesday.
Right. So even Alfred Kinsey once said, a nymphomaniac is someone who has more sex than you do.
Yes. Oh, my God. You know what that is?
What?
Someone who drives faster than you is an asshole. Somebody who drives slower than, somebody who drives slower than you is an asshole. Somebody who drives faster than you is a maniac.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
So it's really hard to then take all of that, and how do you make it such a way that you can really truly measure it?
You cannot.
Right?
So that, yeah, okay, I like this.
So this is now, if hypersexuality seems to kick in overnight, then that is something to pay attention to. Because hypersexuality is a flip switch, can actually be the result of a neurological condition.
I've seen that on Grey's Anatomy.
Right?
Brain tumor.
Brain tumor. According to Dr. Harper, sex addiction and porn addiction doesn't actually exist.
Good to know.
That wanting sex, enjoying sex, and being excited about sex does not make you a sex addict.
Well, what if it's like impeding your job?
Well, they go on to say having cheated on a partner means you did something shitty to someone you love, but it doesn't make you a sex addict.
So you can't use that as an excuse. I'm still asking, what if it impedes you being able to go to work?
Okay. Well, that's what they're talking about. Hold on, I will try to find it. It's an you're just using it as an addiction, but you're not necessarily like a sex addict. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like that's just your methodology.
It's your excuse.
It's your excuse as a methodology of using something, right? Like, for instance, when you talk about alcoholism, a lot of people who are alcoholics, when they give up alcohol, end up now becoming addicted to maybe cigarettes or running marathons or something.
Or shopping.
Right? Because their addiction just goes away from the alcohol to something else. And I think that's their point behind so-called sex addiction, that your problem is not the sex itself. That's just
the addiction. Well, there's been studies that say that there are certain people that have more addictive personalities,
right?
And
it
you're
just happens
more
to
likely to be addicted to literally anything.
Right. So, and for a lot of people, it's just an excuse. Maybe, look, I will tell you, I can assess how well my life is going based upon how many books I've read.
Mm-hmm.
The more books I've read, the less good my life is going because the more I'm trying to escape.
Well, then
so am I,
why do you keep making your reading goals higher?
I actually didn't. This year I made my reading goal lower.
Okay. Yeah, last year was a lot.
Yeah, I made it. But I had to read like a fucking crazy person that last week. It was insane. Remember, I had to read about the snowman having sex. Yeah. I will never get over that one. Did I tell you that my daughter did send me a text to ask me for a link to that book because she was going to share it with her sweetmates?
I was going to say, send her the one about the toaster.
Because that's my daughter. I love her. Love her to death.
I can't believe you told her.
She was with me when I read it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I forgot about that.
Okay, again, she's an adult before y'all start sending me shit mail. My daughter is 18, which is wild enough to believe. But I probably wouldn't have stopped me reading it to her when she was 16. But that's a whole nother story. But that's basically that section. So then the next section, of course, this is a biggie, communicating about what turns you on.
Oh, hey, it's like we tell people that all the time.
Right? And this whole chapter was all about how to talk to your partner about what you want. Now, I don't honestly think we need to go in depth into that because we talk about making sure you communicate and how you can communicate and ways to communicate all the damn time. The one thing that I do want to mention in this section is it's actually a section called, "But what if I don't know enough about myself to know what turns me on?"
I mean, valid question.
Right? So at this point, I'm going to be really obnoxious until you get the damn book and read it. Because if you're still trying to figure this out, reading a lot of this information in here, I think, while it will more likely just help you be curious about something, which is the first step. And then the only way to know whether you like something or not sometimes is to try it. Now, I know Dara doesn't have to try blood play to know she doesn't want to do it.
Nope.
But also by the same token that Dara's already had negative experiences with blood and negative experiences with pain. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist for her to go, then blood play, which includes blood and pain, is not going to be something I like.
Nope. 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
Listen, I wasn't sure if I liked rope play. Rara made it seem amazing, so I tried it. I didn't like it. I tried it twice. Mm-hmm. I still didn't like it.
And good for you for trying it twice, because I think under most circumstances, you need to try something more than once.
Well, here's another example. First time I did wax play, wasn't a fan. Second time I did wax play, wax play, I had a little bit dribbled on me in a very, very
controlled environment.
Small, teeny tiny environment. It was barely anything, but I liked it. So hell, sometimes it depends on the top. That could make an actual difference. It depends on the person you're working with. That's why I thought that I wasn't into rope, because it turns out I didn't like the person that I did the rope with the first time. Mm-hmm. And then I did rope with somebody that I trusted the second time, implicitly trusted this person, still didn't like it.
Yeah.
But the wax, get this. I did wax with the same rope person that I trusted, didn't like wax. Now, 4 years later, I did wax with somebody else, loved it.
I would like you to try wax again where you do like a wax scene versus just a tasting.
Oh, no. It's on my bucket list now. Now that I had that tasting and I was like, kind of like it. Now I feel like I'd be ready to actually do the scene.
Right. Well, that's like me with electro. I don't really like electro in and of itself.
But you like me.
I tolerate electro because I've convinced her to hit me while she does the electro. And I like the hitting.
And you know what? It's the best of both worlds. We both get something out of it.
And in an odd way, Dara being so excited and happy, that makes me happy. So while I don't necessarily like the electro itself, I like making Dara happy.
She just likes watching me bounce off the fucking walls.
I mean, not always, because that's why I tell you guys, go ahead and don't listen in order. But most of the time, I do like to make her happy.
Overall, you do. It's just more specific when you're being kind of silly.
Yeah, well, I'm being bratty.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things that they touched base on in this book was this so-called sexual prime.
Oh, yeah.
And you know how they always talk about sexual prime being when you're young?
Well,
Dr. Harper disagrees, because what she said is there's genital prime and sexual prime, and those are two different things.
Okay, I've never heard of this before.
Right? So genital prime is when you are younger, but sexual prime is actually when you're older.
Is it a mental thing?
Well, what they did is they did a study of men in Norway that found that those in their 50s actually experienced more sexual satisfaction than they did in their 30s, even though maybe things weren't as hard or bounced back as quickly. And it really comes down to things like self-confidence, knowing what you like, knowing what you don't like, knowing what you need.
It's an experience level thing. Okay.
Right? So your genital prime, when things are at their, especially, with the penis, when they can bounce back quicker and all of that, does occur when you're younger. But with everything else to take into account, your sexual prime happens when you're older.
Okay, I like this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And, people have always said that for women, it's older. Their sexual prime is later, like in their 30s.
But she's saying that even beyond that, it really is much later.
Interesting.
So the next section was exploring your pervy desires. And I love that she touched on some important things like knowing where you get your information and vet where you get your information.
I'm telling you, she listens to our podcast.
She must. She went into a whole thing with consent. And she even went into a modern history of consent, which I'm not going to get into in here because it makes me really, really want to redo our consent episode.
That's why you said that.
That's why I sent that.
Okay, that makes sense.
See, I immediately sent Dara a message going, okay, so the first episode I want to redo is consent.
Got you.
All right. In fact, the whole consent section of this book is reason enough to buy this book beyond everything else. All right. So now we're going to get, believe it or not, now we're going to get into the meat of BDSM. And here's what's interesting. There was a study in Denmark and Norway that found when comparing BDSM and vanilla couples, the BDSM couples reported more relationship satisfaction, more closeness, and more trust between the partners because of the vulnerability required to undertake BDSM play. Another study demonstrated that people who participated in BDSM were less neurotic, were more extroverted, were more open to new experiences, were more conscientious, were less rejection sensitive, and had higher subjective well-being, yet were less agreeable.
They haven't met me, have they?
Well, here's what's interesting. So she points out that you're less agreeable as a BDSMer, which would seem like that's a bad thing. But actually, she said that meant they're better at standing up for themselves and not doing the things that they weren't comfortable doing, which is a positive.
Yeah, but all the rest of that, I'm the opposite.
Well, but yes and no. I mean, who knows? Since you've been a kinkster for so many years, how do you know you wouldn't be even worse if you weren't a kinkster?
Oh, God. I can't even imagine that. I've literally been in the scene since I was 19.
Right? So
literally more than half my life. 21 years is exactly 1 year past half my life now. I can't imagine.
So that's the point. You don't know. It's hard to say.
Okay.
So she talked about her viewpoint about BDSM sex, which is what I kind of mentioned, that even though it's usually about sex, sometimes it's about the mind fuck rather than the act of sex. That it's a turn on, but no erogenous stimulation is actually taking place. So this was my favorite. So why is BDSM fun? And she talked about this example, and I loved it. Right? So she mentioned, the little kids who like to spin and spin and spin and get completely dizzy and then fall down?
Yeah, I did that.
Right? Or you've also got the kid over in the corner who's just totally engrossed in a book and loving it.
Also did that.
Right? So some kids don't do the spinning. Some kids don't do the book. But they're each very happy and enjoying themselves in what they're doing.
Oh, hey, look, I'm a switch.
Right? Which translates to BDSM is fun for some people because it is.
Which is the exact same thing of we don't know.
Right? It is. So studies show that a third of the population at any given time has experimented with BDSM activities.
That number seems low to me.
Well, hold on. Well, the vast majority of people have said they've definitely fantasized about it.
That still seems low. I mean, I feel like it should be way more than 1/3.
Well, rewind and go back to where I said the problem with these things is people aren't open and honest.
Right?
And what happens if are they alone in a room with the researcher? Or are they filling out a form while somebody's next to them that they're worried about what that person's going to think of them?
Is their name on it?
Right. So she talked about, and this is where I love, she talked about rack and prick. And here's one of my favorite things. She defined rack as something that was created to replace SSC.
I am 100% telling you she listens to our podcast and that was part of her fucking research.
Oh my God. I was so excited about it. But then she brought up, remember I told you there was something I was going to tell you that my friend said, interesting?
Yeah.
This is what it is. She said that the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, NCSF, has warned about the potential legal problems associated with the use of rack. Because with the use of rack, you are acknowledging risk of harm.
Yes.
So that can create a liability, a legal liability.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because, Rack, I am saying that something I'm going to do to you could potentially harm you. And that's a legal liability because I'm going to do it anyway. So she said, if this is a concern for you, to use prick. Because prick centers the responsibility and the consequence of risky behavior upon the person taking the risk.
And remind us again what prick is.
Personal responsibility informed consensual kink.
So if you don't want to have legal issues, use prick.
Right? So that was the recommendation. She did separate BDSM and kink. I don't know how I feel about that, but I can understand. You know, I know a lot of people who do. Though I would like to say if you separate BDSM and kink because you think BDSM has to include DS, you're full of fucking crap. Because you do it without the B and you do it without the S&M. And you still call it BDSM. So you can do it without the DS. Thank you. That's my soapbox. I'll get back down now. She does question about what non-sexual kink look like by saying that the definition of kink includes sexual excitement and gratification.
Okay, never mind. She does not listen to the podcast.
So,
because that right there, she would have known.
Well, she wouldn't know how we felt, but that doesn't mean she's going to agree with us.
Because
because she's wrong.
We have given so many examples of how to do it.
Well, I think she goes back to the fact that if you're turned on, whether you actually touch a genital, whether you actually have an orgasm, whether you actually stimulate the genitals, or sergeants, whatever. whatever
I like lieutenants personally.
I'm more about the major, but that's okay.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, yeah, there's also majors,
but
major hunks, majorly hung,
so bad. This is what happens when you do 4 episodes. We're just
I can't
lost
believe
now.
we made it. I'm losing
I'm so
my
close.
shit
I'm like
right
3
now.
more dots and we're done.
Okay, go dot.
Okay. But so she said you can like the things that others think of as kinky, but for you it would be for different reasons and not because it's one of your kinks. So I guess I understand looking at it from that point. So I'm perfectly comfortable doing impact without there being any sexual satisfaction from it. I know for other people, they can't. They need the sexual aspect of the impact.
Okay, yeah.
So just because I don't, does that mean it's not kink and sex related? I know it's a very interesting thing to talk about.
But they could do something else kinky that isn't sex related that you, like they could have rope and that's not sex related for them. But you, on the other hand.
But here's what's interesting. As I know you're about to point out, so I'm going to get to it before you. It makes me wet when I do rope. But here's the thing. I was playing with a friend. So the friend herself was not what was turning me on.
It was the rope.
It was the rope itself. If the rope and I could just have a minute alone in the corner, we'd have been good. But so it turned me on. And yet I had zero expectation of an orgasm. I had zero expectation that I was going to be touched in a sexual manner.
I would actually like to see you in that type of predicament play.
So here's what's interesting. So the rope turned me on and made me wet. But I was doing it with a friend with zero expectation of any sexual satisfaction. So was it sexual or not?
Well, according to her, just because you got kind of turned on, that would be sex, right?
Right. So I kind of see I kind of understand the point of putting sex with the kink when you look at it from that aspect, which is why I tend to say platonic kink specifically to just showcase there's going to be no sexual satisfaction at the end of this.
As opposed to non-sexual kink? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Difference in terminology because reasons.
Right. But what's interesting, because one of the things that I don't do during negotiations, and I wonder if I should do it, is I assume during negotiations it's going to be non-sexual or platonic. Because I am operating under if I haven't said yes, assume it's a no.
But not everybody feels that way,
right?
So you should probably start putting that in negotiations. Because what happens if somebody goes and grabs a Hitachi?
Yeah. Well, at this point, there's very few people I bottom for. And the last person that I did bottom for from an impact scene, I did, since it was the first time, it was Hot Asian Guy. It was the first time we were ever playing together. I did specifically state to him during that negotiation, this will be non-sexual.
For me, with Hot Asian Guy, I would probably explicitly say, let's make it sexual.
Well, he's just way out. I found out he's actually younger than my oldest.
Still within my age range.
Right? Stay away from my oldest. No. I know, he's vanilla shit, so it's fine.
Shut your fucking mouth.
But that's why I remembered for the first time to not allow any assumptions when I scened with him. Normally when I play with people at this point, they know me well enough and have seen me well enough and know my stance well enough. I don't have to say it. They already know. Mm-hmm. But this was the first time I had played with him, and I wanted to make sure it was crystal clear.
Yeah.
So anyway, she did talk, and I don't know if I've ever thought about this before. And maybe I just never put words to it. She talks a little bit about age play. And she said to her, age play is just another facet of power dynamics. And I was like going, yeah, that makes sense, because in real life, the parent holds the power over the child.
Yeah.
So it made total sense to me. And I'm not sure I ever just framed it that way. I probably already knew it. And it's
one of those things you know, but you don't know because you didn't really ever put the words to the topic before.
Yeah, I
maybe?
had it in a black frame, and then she put it in a gold frame, and it looked different to me in the gold frame.
Okay. I followed that.
Thank you, because I wasn't sure.
No, I followed it. I just... Okay.
So, in conclusion, as Dara's waking up, in conclusion, I actually highly recommend this book. I was so impressed with it, and I so enjoyed it, and it was very realistic. I mean, yes, there's sciencey stuff in here, but even the sciencey stuff, to my non-science brain, made complete sense, and definitely made me go, huh, interesting.
That's my line. Bitch.
And I do want to go back now and see what other books she has, and maybe read another one to cover for the
Yeah, Rara, you should totally unfuck your blowjob.
And or speak to her and bring her on as a guest.
That'd be cool. Then we can actually ask her if she listened to our podcast before.
Right? Well, no, because that's true. She might listen to it once we ask her to be on. But I haven't, we have this long, extensive reading list on our resources page. And I have to admit, the vast majority of them I've never read or even heard of, for that matter. But this, I'm going to give this 5 stars. 2 thumbs up.
Okay, Ebert.
But that's it for Unfuck Your Kink. Has your kink been unfucked?
No, now I'm just more confused. But that's okay. That's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
I'm too tired to breathe right now. So
do you want to say goodbye to the listeners then?
Bye. I had to do it differently.
Well, that's not really saying goodbye.
Okay, you do it.
Because we're still recording.
Coño tu madre.
We're still recording because you didn't say it right. You got to say it right, and then the recording stops.
You do it.
Bye. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a minute of our fun and educational content. New episodes drop every Friday.
If you love what we do and want to show support, there are several ways. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/pinkkinkpodcast. You can support our affiliates or help spread the word about our kinky podcast to your friends.
Don't forget to rate and review Pink Kink on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Those 5-star reviews go a long way in boosting our podcast through the algorithm and reaching more listeners.
Sign up for our Pink Kink Institute classes. Shop at our Etsy shop, Pink Kink Boutique. Stay connected with us on social media. You'll find all the links on our link tree posted in the show notes.
Your support means the world to us. So until next time, stay pretty, stay safe,
and stay twisted.